Hello and welcome back to Cinematic Universe. My name is Ernesto Martinez, and joining me for the first time is Benjamin Chrisman. Benjamin, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. Looking forward to talking about everything that went on, as much as there is in Days of Future Past.
Yes, the movie we are reviewing today is X-Men Days of Future Past. Finally! After so long, from X2, we've had this rocky, jumbled mess, as you will, since X2 United. We had The Last Stand by Brett Ratner.
Oh boy.
The Force Down Our Throats X-Men Origins Wolverine.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Nothing. Nada.
Then we had a chance to put back the fresh take on the franchise with First Class, with Matthew Vaughn. A Wolverine movie worthy of its title, The Wolverine, that came out last year.
Absolutely.
And this year, X-Men Days of Future Past, which, as one person said it well, I think, I don't remember their name, is like, X-Men Days of Future Past, best cleanup of a messy franchise.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I wasn't really sure what to expect going in. I mean, I knew the basics. I mean, the two different casts, a boatload of characters, time travel, Sentinels. But I was not expecting what you just said as the movie went on. It was quite the surprise.
Yes. So let's dive into the timelines, because if you ignore Days of Future Past and you just have the current movies from the first X-Men all the way to the Wolverine, there is some continuity issues. For example, in the Wolverine movie, you see that end credit scene where Charles and Magneto are at the airport trying to recruit Wolverine because they sense that a great danger is on the uprising, and it does happen. We never really get to see how Charles gets back into his body, even though there was, quote-unquote, end credit scene in The Last Stand, but who remembers that outside the comic book community?
Yeah, or the diehard X-Men fans.
Yes, and the fact that The Last Stand was basically null and void since Magneto got his magnetism powers back, so that didn't work for shit anyway. And then the fact that you have First Class, and First Class is basically doing its own thing, where you have characters like Havoc, who's supposed to be Cyclops' twin or younger brother, but he's all the way in the 60s, so I kept assuming that they would make Havoc Cyclops' father, but that's never explored, so we just go with it.
Yeah, that's what I went with as well.
So, Days of Future Past, the setup is that it's 20 years into the future after the credits scene from the Wolverine. So it's kind of basically 15 years into our future, in a way.
Yep.
And the problem is that the Sentinel program has gone out of control, and all the Sentinels kind of have this Skynet approach, where both humans and mutants are now enslaved and are being picked apart one by one. And the last of the Resistance is trying to correct all the mistakes and the sins of the past, which has Charles, Magneto, Storm, Wolverine, and another small group of people led by Iceman and Kitty Pryde, along with new characters such as Blink, Warpath, Sunspot, Bishop, cool character by the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are pretty much it.
Yeah, those are the only ones that have survived.
That have survived until this point, and we kind of see that the key point of traveling to the past is with Kitty Pryde, who, with no explanation, because with comic books you just go with it, she has the ability to phase a person's mind years into the past, and the only person who can do such a thing is Wolverine, because of his healing factor. Now, some could argue that Kitty Pryde wasn't used because, oh well, she's not that interesting. But the real reason is because Wolverine is the bread and butter of Fox, so of course he's going to be the main character.
Right. I mean, I was partially right along there with everybody else in the time leading up to this movie's release, seeing Wolverine everywhere, reading all the speculation that this is going to be the Wolverine plus a bunch of other people. Mm-hmm. But that didn't end up happening. I mean, it made sense, like you said, with his healing ability, being the only person to, I don't know, be the logical choice for this, but he was really fun. I mean, I didn't ever feel tired of the character, and I really enjoyed what they did with time travel. Instead of just sending the person back as themselves, they send that person's mind, mm-hmm. which I haven't ever seen before, but I really found that fresh and enjoyable.
It's kind of interesting that I brought up Terminator with the Skynet comment. Because when you see Wolverine wake up in the past, which is supposed to be the 70s, he gets up from his waterbed all naked, and that's basically the standard for the Terminators, where they go back in time, or anyone going back in time, and they're all naked. So right. I found that to be kind of an interesting nod to the Terminator franchise, if it was intentional, or I'm probably just reaching for straws here.
Well, you can go either way, but I have to say, since you brought that specific part of the movie up, I think before my mother and I went and saw this at local theater, I had no idea that the theater we would be going to would have that movie in 3D. Uh-huh. And all I saw when I looked it up was, hey, they have it. Awesome. Let's go see it. No idea there would be 3D until we get in the theater, pay for the tickets, and the person hands us the 3D glasses. So I said to my mom, like, wow, this should be interesting. I haven't seen a 3D movie since The Avengers, when that was released. So, much to my surprise, I don't know or remember the minute mark, but got a very surprising 3D shot of a naked Hugh Jackman. So that was something else.
You gotta give it to Hugh Jackman for...
Oh, man.
God knows how much food he had to sacrifice and how many hours at the gym to look like that.
Or how many chickens he had to slaughter to eat. Because, I mean, my gosh,
he was a beast.
In every sense of the word. I mean, he's probably one of the most consistent actors that, I mean, like, maybe only for myself, but puts other guys to shame. And, like, you see him and it's like, ah, damn, now I feel bad about myself. I gotta go do something.
Yeah. It's much less about feeling bad about yourself and more about him being one of the very few comic book characters on screen and actually looks like a superhero physically. And
Right. And that, of course, can be attributed to his love of the character and possibly the franchise as well.
Yeah, not bad for 14 years of a long-standing career choice. I mean, if it weren't for Wolverine, right. God knows what would have been Hugh Jackman's breakout role to make him the star that he is today.
Yeah, or when that would have come and, I guess, what it would have led to, pretty much. Yeah,
because I remember a piece coming out that it would have been Russell Crowe for the role.
Oh, wow.
So imagine seeing Russell Crowe getting out of that bed, buck naked. Imagine that, put that image in your head.
Does anybody have to be naked for this? Wow.
But yeah, Wolverine, he's in all the posters because, Fox, they like to ride him until the well is dry. I mean,
right.
Even in the post, remember that poster I put with both old and young Magneto, and at the bottom it says, Hugh Jackman, X-Men Days of Future Past. And I'm like, Hugh Jackman is not in this poster.
Yeah, you gotta love the internet and its technical flubs.
But yeah, Wolverine, the character, he's basically the bridge between the past, the present, and the future. Huh? But it's really just him as the bridge because he's not, quote-unquote, the main character, per se.
No.
The main characters here are Charles Xavier, Magneto, and Mystique.
For sure.
So let's talk about Charles.
Oh, sure. Well, I guess I should have thrown this out at the beginning, but I am by no means a diehard X-Men fan. I remember somewhat vividly being, 12, maybe 13, seeing the very first X-Men on TV in a hotel lobby, and not having ever seen it before, I was really interested what that movie was and who this guy with the claws were and what they were doing. And holy crap, that guy's shooting lasers out of his eyes. This looks awesome. So fortunately, I saw X-Men shortly after that, and then X2, and right on down the line. And with First Class, it really, I guess I should say, it reinvigorated the interest for me, because much like many other fans after what The Last Stand was and the Origins movie turned out to be, I was a little turned off from the X-Men franchise. So I didn't even see First Class when that was released in theaters. I ended up borrowing it from a friend from school and watching it at home when I was sick. And I really enjoyed it. I really liked the younger characters, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, and everybody else. And, of course, that, I don't know, made me pay attention a little bit more to where they would go. And when this was announced, I did a little reading. Didn't know that it was based on a comic, or otherwise I would have tried to have read that to get some prior knowledge. But I really, really liked what McAvoy brought to the character of Xavier this time around. We get him in a very different place than what you would think after First Class. I mean, I remember seeing a very scraggly-looking Xavier with long hair and a beard, and he was walking, of all things. So that immediately caused me to sit back and say, now, how the heck is this happening?
And we do get an explanation.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting explanation, one that I quite enjoyed, because even though he regained the use of his legs, he was still crippled in some way. Mm-hmm. The character of Charles Xavier, it's like they were saying, would be crippled in one way or another. He shut himself off from everything, almost everything, mutant-related. The school was in complete disarray, or near complete disarray. Partly about his journey in believing in himself and other people as well.
Yeah, because in this movie, he is basically at the bottom of to the lowest low, because after getting shot by accident, because, Magneto couldn't dodge the bullet anywhere else, he found a way to get his legs back, but at the same time, he forced himself to forget about his mutant abilities, because we're in the 70s, we got the Vietnam War, and most of his students were recruited to the war. So this is a guy who slowly, after already losing a lot, kept losing more and more and more, to the point where the only person he had that was loyal to him was Beast, Hank McCoy. And it's kind of interesting that they introduced that the reason why he can walk and not use his powers, because it's also pointing out one of the many issues people had back in that decade with the use of drugs and whatnot, especially with the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And then we have Magneto, and why he's imprisoned, which I found to be a little hilarious and at the same time interesting, because it's mentioned that the president at the time, JFK, and it's been mentioned before in the older movies, was a mutant. To which point, to this day, I'm still wondering what kind of abilities he had, because...
Yeah, that would have been really cool. Like if he turned out to be someone like Xavier, who could influence
exactly,
people, like through his words, perhaps, or something else.
Yeah, most likely. So between Charles and Magneto, we kind of go back to seeing the staple that make these two characters as awesome as they are, which is their differing opinions on how to handle Homo sapiens versus mutants.
Yes.
Magneto thinks he's right in what he's doing, but for regular people, we know he's kind of has a villainous approach to it, even though he's doing it for the greater good of his race.
Yeah.
Because this is a guy who was born in Germany during the World War II as a Jewish kid,
Yeah.
So it feels like history is repeating itself, and he's trying to make sure it doesn't happen again to another group of people. God, what an awesome Magneto he is.
Right?
I mean, I found his costume to be a little awkward given the period. I feel it looks better when he's in his older self.
I'm looking at a cast photo now, and it has Ian McKellen and Fassbender standing almost next to each other, and you can see obviously the parallels between the two, where how Fassbender will eventually obviously become McKellen in a character aspect. But I have to say, I much preferred the look here instead of the one presented at the end of First Class. Granted, that one was only around for 10, 15 seconds perhaps, but the look of that helmet and like just the brighter colors definitely was not to my liking. But I don't know, costumes aside, Fassbender really brought it, I felt, in this movie just as much as McAvoy did with Xavier. I remember reading the comment with First Class, saying that it was basically X-Men Origins not Wolverine. We already have that. X-Men Origins Magneto. Because we see him globetrotting like he's straight out of a Bond movie.
Yeah, Nazi hunting.
And here, in Days of Future Past, I was right along there with you when they said he was allegedly responsible for either killing Kennedy or trying to save him from somebody else. That was a very interesting twist that I quite liked.
Yeah, which kind of brings to who broke him out, which was Quicksilver.
Oh, man.
Now, I do remember the first time the picture of Quicksilver came out, and
oh boy,
everybody hated it.
Everybody and their mom hated it.
Even the non-comic book fans just looked at it and they're like, what the hell is this thing?
Right.
Because I remember when Avengers 2 was close to starting production, it was announced that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch would be the new characters, and then a week later, Bryan Singer and the Fox rep team released that they were also going to use Quicksilver, and that's where the whole copyright debate started.
Sure.
The one thing that I will admit, the scene where they tried to get Magneto out, that was cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was a very, very clever way of using slow motion, because I read it somewhere that because of Quicksilver's casting, Singer wouldn't be able to use slow-mo like he was apparently prone to do, except for when Quicksilver was using his powers. Now, of course, the breakout scene was definitely a high point. It wasn't the high point for myself, but just that scene of all the guards pointing their, I want to say, plastic guns at the gang, and then all of a sudden everything stops.
Yeah.
And for a second, you think it's Xavier, who has somehow gotten or regained his powers, and that he's frozen them. Nope. Camera moves over. We see Quicksilver putting on his goggles, putting on the Walkman headphones, and just has a ball with everybody in there, making them punch each other. I think using the recoil of the guns to knock two guys out, tasting some kind of sauce or soup. And then there weren't a lot of people in the theater when I went and saw this, but everybody laughed during that scene, and I did too. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't laugh.
Oh.
But that's not because I'm trying to purposely hate the character. The thing that I just didn't like was the actor, point being.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the first time I saw Quicksilver was in X-Men Evolution, and I'm pretty sure the actor got some of the mannerisms down. But the problem is the actor himself. Every time I looked at him, I just wanted to punch him in the face. He just had this douchey look that I just somebody give me a guns, give me a lightning rod. Let me take this guy out. Because it was the only time where I actually laughed, like really lost it, was in the elevator when Quicksilver asked Magneto, "So what they got you in here for? For assassinating the president?" Then he looks back at the guard and says, "Shit."
Oh yeah.
That was the one time I lost it because I didn't see his face, but the mannerism was there. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure the whole Quicksilver scene was trying to match or even improve upon the Nightcrawler scene from the second X-Men movie in the White House.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
So I'm pretty sure Singer was trying to not just highlight the character, but outdo himself again.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, while I want to say that the escape scene was better than the White House scene, it has been quite a while since I've last seen X2, so I won't try and make that comparison.
Oh, sure. Now we got Mystique, played by Jennifer Lawrence.
Yes.
Her character is still evolving, because when we saw her in First Class, she was just your average girl who has this amazing ability to turn into anybody else, and she is trying to figure out what her place in the world is.
Right.
And before she became the badass butt-kicking Mystique that we know from the first two movies, played by Rebecca Romijn, Jennifer Lawrence is mostly trying to bring more of a character and drama to her.
Yeah.
And she's trying to struggle with where does she stand now between humans and mutants, because she's clearly all for mutants. And in every scene that we see her in, she's just hunting down everybody who has a vendetta against them, who's holding any prison camps, and slowly she's just going to turn into that heartless wench that we saw.
Yeah, it was almost like no matter what Charles or Eric tried to do, the dominoes would just keep falling towards that end result of the tough as nails, no nonsense Mystique from the first two movies, like you said. But I ended up finding that as the movie went on, and this was something that I thought about for a while after the movie was over, that more so than anything, I mean, obviously she has a prejudice against humans for the way they've treated mutants, and understandably so, but more than anything, I felt that she was, like you said, just trying to find her place in the world. At this point in the movie, or where we pick up with her, she's been used by both men that she's known for almost all of her life. I mean, in one way or another, both Charles and Eric have tried to control and influence her through their own means for their own intentions. Here, she's done with that. She's not having any of that anymore. And more than once, I had the thought that, or jokingly, of course, that this movie could have also been named X-Men: The Battle for Raven's Soul, or however it went.
I'm pretty sure Marcos would have picked up something better than that.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, that's why I'm not in the movie naming business.
That's okay.
But, it was really interesting to watch unfold throughout this movie's runtime. I mean, for my part, all I knew of Mystique was Rebecca Romijn's character and portrayal from those first two movies, and I mean, of course, the substantial introduction with Lawrence from the first movie.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it, among many other things. I'll probably say that another half a dozen times, but I'm just being honest.
No, yeah, and then because of her, that's why the Sentinel program exists.
Yeah.
The way it is in the future, because the future Sentinels have this super adaptoid kind of way of fighting mutants, and it's because they're powered by a reverse engineer of her mutant powers, which brings forth Bolivar Trask, played by Peter Dinklage.
Oh, yes.
Now, Peter Dinklage, in my opinion, he acted the way he was supposed to, the way it was necessary supposed to be. He
Right.
didn't go balls out like he does in Game of Thrones, but
Of course.
I feel like the character should have been dedicated a few more minutes of screen time, which was my only negative, well, one of my few negatives. Now, they don't mention at all that he is a midget in this movie.
No.
Like, they gloss right over it. One could
Right.
say that that is great. They're not doing that whole cliche that, oh, you're a small person and everything.
Right.
I kind of felt they should have. And the only reason why I feel is that because it's still the 70s.
Of course.
Black people and gays are still being discriminated at that point, so why not a midget?
Sure.
And the fact that he's not only is his purpose of creating the Sentinel program is to help unite mankind against a possible common threat, but the fact that he himself is part of a mutation, in layman's term, that they didn't explore that. I felt that it kind of felt a little bit cheated out, but overall it doesn't really take away from what was trying to be done here. But personally, I feel they could have dedicated more screen time to explore a little bit of the character and less screen time for President Nixon's dogs. And so,
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with that. I mean, I didn't have any issues with the character and how he was handled personally. I do partially agree. Actually, no, forget that. I'm right there with you with the I don't know lack of addressing his height or his stature, what have you. But I feel, thinking about it again, he did the best with what he was given. He fulfilled his purpose.
yeah.
Let's put it that way. I mean, he wouldn't be the same character from Game of Thrones because that wouldn't make much sense in this. I don't know, in this movie.
No, he's a new version of the character as far as any of us are concerned.
Oh well.
Because I've never read anything on the character in the books, but all points to what it's supposed to be. He's fairly different while still maintaining the character traits. I don't know. I looked it up.
Yeah. Yeah, he was fun. I mean, he did what he needed to do, move the story along, not in an obvious way, not in a laborious way. So
Yeah. And
wasn't a problem for me.
Yeah, and we managed to get multiple villains in this movie. We got Magneto,
Yeah.
Bolivar, the Sentinels, Stryker, the younger version of Stryker,
Oh yes.
the guy who gives Wolverine his adamantium claws, and kind of with Mystique, because she is kind of villainous in a way. And it's amazing how this movie manages to handle its villains a lot better than in Spider-Man 2. And I'll keep thumping on that every time I see a movie with multiple villains.
But yeah, I do definitely agree with you in how they handled their villains, and not only their villains, but the characters as well. Because in the weeks leading up to this, we kept seeing cast announcement after cast announcement after cast announcement. Everybody would be coming back for this movie. And
confirmed and unconfirmed. So we were also hoping that other characters would appear, and they did.
Right. And one of my personal concerns about this is, all right, is everybody going to get their due screen time, or are we going to have somebody be on screen longer than they should have, and other people get the shaft? How is this going to go down?
And they do. They get ample screen time.
They do. Yeah. Not once did I think to myself, I really wish we would have seen more of them or seen less of that character. Everybody got their time, did what they did best, and I don't know, moved on to the next one.
Yeah. Finally, we got to see Storm be a badass. And I'm not saying that she never was a badass, but in this one, we finally got to see her be a badass.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the scene, I want to say towards the end, of course now that I'm talking about it, I forget its placement, but the scene with
in China
her and her lightning
and
the X-Jet coming out behind her. Now, I don't know if this would have been as good of a scene in 2D.
It was, trust me.
Oh, okay, it was. Well, for myself, seeing in 3D, it looked just gorgeous. I loved it. And yet, even though I don't think she said as much as she did in past movies, but that was never a problem for me.
Yeah, it was short and sweet.
Yeah. Also, I guess one thing worth pointing out is the wig that was used this time around was a lot better, I felt, than ones in the past.
Oh, totally. I kind of feel they went a step down in Last Stand when they tried to make her hip. But yeah. Anyways, it's glad that the new characters that were introduced, like Warpath and Blink, I gotta say, Blink ended up being my favorite character of the whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't say much, but her powers speak for themselves.
Yeah.
I'd say I want to see more of her, but until we see more future X-Men films, I don't think that's going to be going to be a factor in. But for what it's worth, I'm glad we got to see a character like Blink.
Yeah, definitely. Out of all the new characters that we saw in this movie, I definitely enjoyed her the most. Although, I guess I should at least acknowledge the Human Torch. Excuse me. The Sunspot.
Sunspot.
Whatever his name was. He was a fun character. No. Albeit bearing quite the similarities to another character that we know.
Yeah, but that's the I think it's less about bearing similarities and more about when you're creating a superpower, there's really not many more options you can go with. You just pick something and run with it.
Yeah, especially in this day and age where we've seen almost everything.
Yeah. Now that we got all the major things out, this basically is a reboot for the franchise because when the movie ends, we see older by the gray streak on his hair, Wolverine, and still set 20 years into our future. He's waking up and all is right in the world. The School of Higher Learning is still intact. We see a cameo of Kelsey Grammer as Hank McCoy, Beast, walking around the halls.
Yeah.
We see new students walking around. We see Bobby and Rogue still together, which was a really nice touch even though Rogue got basically cut from the movie.
Yeah.
We see Storm still being a teacher. We see Kitty Pryde being a teacher with Colossus because supposedly those two have a relationship in the comics.
Yeah, I heard some things about that afterwards, which, thinking about it again, that was a nice little nod.
Yeah, because they tried to force a love triangle in Last Stand, and that went south quickly.
Very. Oh, boy.
And then the biggest correction that we all wanted, Jean Grey comes back.
Oh, man.
In all her wondrous, fiery red hair glory. And Scott Summers. Who I think had to be the second highlight of the moment in the movie because he just pops up just perfect.
Right.
Snapping Wolverine back, and they both have their usual bickering, so that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I am by no means a hardcore or even that much of a well-versed X-Men fan, but have seen the movies, like I said, so it was, I'm not ashamed to say, I got a little emotional seeing you stand there.
That was okay.
I was partially with Logan as he walked towards him, like, oh my gosh, he's really there. Is this legit? Oh, holy crap.
Yeah. We knew it was coming. We just wanted to see if they actually would go through with it, and they did.
Yeah, and they did a very good job with it.
Yeah. Any last few negatives you have for the movie, or was the whole process a success for you?
Oh.
Before we get to final thoughts.
Sure. Oh boy. I really can't think of anything.
Well, I got a couple.
Since I say that now, I'm going to think of like half a dozen things as soon as we finish here. But
oh, yeah.
For all intents and purposes, No, other negatives.
Well, the last few negatives I have is Wolverine's adamantium claws, because in the Wolverine we see him lose them, and he's back to his bone claws.
Yeah.
One could argue that Magneto helped him get back his adamantium claws by manipulating the metal already in his body, but
sure.
When you're a casual moviegoer, you need an answer to these kinds of questions. Like, if he lost his claws back in the Wolverine, how does he have them back in the future?
Mm-hmm.
And second, the gray streak on his hair, and there's less of a negative and more of a big question mark, because you never really get a good sense of how Wolverine's aging process works.
No, that's true.
Because he's lived over 150 years by now, and it's only now that he's getting his gray hair, so it's a little bit of a nitpick, not of a negative.
Yeah, I suppose one could argue that Logan might not be quote-unquote immortal, like most thinks, that instead he just ages very, very slowly. I think, aside from the claw dispute, I wasn't bothered by that so much.
All right. So, final ratings. What would you give this movie?
I'm going to have to go with star rating and give it 4.5 out of 5. As I've said already, I really enjoyed this movie. And I would see it again if the theater wasn't like 35 to 40 minutes away from where I live.
Oh, I got the same issues here. I'm going to give the movie... I might have already given it 5 stars on the Facebook group here.
Sure.
But that's because it doesn't do the 0.5 system. So I'll give it on the 10-point system, a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
It almost became a perfect movie.
Uh-huh.
So I'll give it a 9.5. And yeah, overall a success for the movie. Great visuals. The budget didn't seem to get too crazy. It all seemed to go for good use. So yeah, so far the best X-Men movie done.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for Cinematic Universe. Thank you, Benjamin, for joining us for this piece. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.